Cyber Threat Brief for June 14, 2026. Anthropic disabled its two most advanced AI models after a U.S. government export control order over jailbreak concerns. Microsoft patches failed to fix an on-prem SharePoint 0-day now under active attack. Chinese threat actors maintained 10-year persistence in an isolated network by backdooring PAM and OpenSSH authentication stacks. Here's the full breakdown of today's top security stories. Daily Security Brief, June 14, 2026. Next section, Critical Alerts. Microsoft patches failed to fix on-prem SharePoint, which is now under 0-day attack. Microsoft's previous patches for on-premises SharePoint installations failed to remediate a vulnerability that is now being actively exploited in the wild. The 0-day allows attackers to compromise SharePoint servers that were thought to be patched. This affects on-premises SharePoint deployments only. SharePoint Online is not impacted. Action: review your on-premises SharePoint installations immediately. Monitor for indicators of compromise. Wait for Microsoft to release working patches before deploying. Isolate vulnerable SharePoint servers from external access where possible. Source: the Register. Next section, Business and Infrastructure Threats. Critical Splunk Enterprise flaw lets attackers run code without authentication. CVE 2026-20253. Splunk Enterprise versions below 10.2.4 and 10.0.7 contain a critical vulnerability. CVSS, the Common Vulnerability Scoring System, 9.8, that allows unauthenticated remote code execution through an exposed PostgreSQL sidecar service endpoint. The flaw exists because the endpoint lacks authentication controls, allowing network-reachable attackers to create or truncate arbitrary files, then weaponize database restoration to achieve remote code execution. Watchtower Labs published a working exploit chain that uses the /backup and /restore endpoints to dump attacker-controlled database contents, restore them with SQL execution, write arbitrary files using low export, and overwrite frequently executed Python scripts with malicious payloads. EPSS, the exploit prediction scoring system, score is currently low 0, 1, 21st percentile, but public exploit details will drive opportunistic scanning. Action: upgrade immediately to Splunk Enterprise 10.0.7, 10.2.4, or 10.4. Splunk Cloud is not affected. If you cannot patch immediately, restrict network access to PostgreSQL sidecar endpoints and monitor for unauthorized access attempts to /v1/postgres/recovery/backup and /v1/postgres/recovery/restore. Sources: The Hacker News. Chinese hackers hijack Authflow, spy on isolated network for a decade. Chinese APT, Advanced Persistent Threat. Group Velvet Ant breached a large organization's isolated critical infrastructure network in 2016 and maintained undetected access for 10 years. The campaign, dubbed Operation Highland by Signia, began with internet-facing server compromises, then pivoted to an air-gapped network with no external connectivity. Velvet Ant modified Nginx configurations to proxy specially crafted HTTP requests through a compromised backend server to a fast CGI wrapper that established SSH connections into the isolated environment. Once inside, the attackers backdoored PAM modules, PAM Unix, with 9 distinct variants that accepted hard-coded passwords and harvested credentials. They also replaced OpenSSH components, SSH, SSHD, SCP, with Trojanized versions that logged credentials and commands. By controlling the authentication stack, Velvet Ant gained visibility into all administrative activity and could bypass normal authentication. This extended the 2024 campaigns, where Velvet Ant exploited F5 BIGIP devices for 3 years and a Cisco NXOS 0-day. Action: audit PAM module integrity on Linux systems, especially PAM Unix. Verify checksums of OpenSSH binaries against known good versions. Review Nginx and fast CGI configurations for unauthorized modifications. Monitor for SSH connections originating from web server processes. Look for processes masquerading as legitimate daemons, e.g., SMBDD for SOCKS 5 proxies. This attack demonstrates that air-gapped networks are vulnerable if attackers control the path between external and internal zones. Source: Bleeping Computer. Ex-school district employee jailed for hacks on former employer Ezekiel Dean Potter, 34, was sentenced to 21 months in prison for conducting a 21-month cyber attack campaign against his former employer, the Sadel Community School District in Iowa. Potter retained access credentials after his employment ended in April 2023 and repeatedly targeted the district systems, deleting the Facebook page, removing employee access to educational platforms, and attempting password resets. He deleted the district's Apple School Manager account data, user accounts, passwords, device management, disabling MacBook and iPad management for a week. In January 2025, Potter accessed the Schoology learning management system through a Google administrator account, deleted an IT employee's account, and later deleted 9 Gmail accounts, including the IT director and superintendent. He began using a VPN after receiving Google security alerts. Federal investigators traced activity to IP addresses at Potter's subsequent employers. A USB drive recovered from Potter's desk at a former employer contained spreadsheets with SADL account credentials. Potter pleaded guilty under the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act and must pay $59,668.81 in restitution. Action: immediately disable all access for departing employees, especially IT staff with privileged access. Audit administrator accounts quarterly and remove unused credentials. Enable multi-factor authentication on all administrative consoles, Google Workspace, Apple School Manager, learning management systems. Monitor for access from unexpected IP addresses or VPN exit nodes. Maintain offsite backups of critical account data. This case shows credential retention is a persistent insider threat vector. Source: Bleeping Computer. NPM12 will change script execution behavior to prevent supply chain attacks. GitHub announced that NPM version 12, expected in July 2026, will block automatic execution of pre-install, install, and post-install scripts from dependencies by default. This change responds to recent supply chain attacks, Team PCP, Shai-Hulud worm, that abused automatic script execution during NPM install to infect thousands of developers. The update also blocks native Node.js builds unless explicitly allowed, and disables resolution of Git dependencies and remote HTTPS tarballs unless developers opt in. Starting with NPM 11.16.0, developers can run npm approve scripts allow script spending to generate an allow list in package. JSON. Once committed, NPM 11.16.0 plus will warn if install routines execute scripts not on the allow list. The change also closes a code execution path where Git dependencies could override the Git executable via npmrc. Action: upgrade to NPM 11.16.0 or later immediately. Run your normal install and review warnings. Use npm approve scripts allow script spending to see which packages have scripts, approve trusted ones, and commit the updated package. JSON. This prepares you for NPM 12's breaking change in July. Review your dependency tree for unexpected scripts before the cutover. Source: Security Week. Next section, General Security News. US Gov asks Anthropic to ban foreign national access to Fable. Mythos. The US government issued an export control directive on June 12, ordering Anthropic to immediately block access to its Fable 5 and Mythos 5 AI models by any foreign national, inside or outside the US, citing national security concerns. Because the scope includes foreign-born Anthropic employees, the company suspended access to both models for all users worldwide. Fable 5 had been rolled out free to Pro, Max, and Enterprise customers 3 days earlier on June 9. The directive stems from a reported jailbreak technique, which Anthropic says consists of asking the model to read a specific codebase and identify software flaws. Anthropic reviewed the demo and found only minor bugs that other publicly available models, including OpenAI's GPT-5, can already discover without bypass. The company disputes that a narrow, non-universal jailbreak should trigger a recall affecting hundreds of millions of users, stating this standard would halt all new model deployments across the industry. All other Anthropic models, including Claude Opus 4.8, remain available. The UK's Minister for AI said the pause affects both US and UK customers. Sources: Bleeping Computer Cyberscoop. Russians are posing as Signal support to launch phishing attacks. Russian threat actors are impersonating Signal support staff to conduct phishing campaigns. The attacks target Signal users through fake support communications designed to steal credentials or deliver malware. Signal does not provide direct user support through unsolicited messages, making these impersonation attempts a social engineering vector. Action: remind users that Signal does not initiate support contact. All legitimate support happens through official channels only. Treat unsolicited support messages as phishing attempts. Enable registration lock in Signal settings to prevent account takeover. Source: The Register. Google fires Subal at alleged Chinese phishers over AI-powered fraud ops. Google filed a lawsuit against a Chinese phishing operation called Outsider Enterprise that used Telegram-based infrastructure to send millions of scam texts impersonating trusted brands. The operation used AI to power fraud campaigns at scale. Google's legal action targets the operators and infrastructure supporting the phishing-as-a-service platform. Source: The Register. DEFCON Franklin Project enlists hackers to harden critical infrastructure. DEFCON announced the Franklin Project, expanding the successful voting village model to cover all critical infrastructure sectors across the entire conference. DEF-CON founder Jeff Moss said the voting village reports have been so successful at identifying security gaps that the approach will now be applied conference-wide. The initiative brings hackers and critical infrastructure operators together to identify and remediate vulnerabilities before adversaries exploit them. Source: The Register. 10 years since the first Corp ransomware, Mikko Hyppönen sees no end in sight. F-Secure's Mikko Hyppönen marked the 10-year anniversary of the first corporate ransomware attack, with an assessment that the threat shows no signs of declining. Hyppönen noted that while the threat landscape continues to evolve, ransomware remains a stable career path for InfoSec professionals due to its persistence. Source: The Register. EQT buys majority share in Swiss cybersecurity biz Acronis private equity firm. EQT acquired a majority stake in Swiss cybersecurity company Acronis at a valuation equivalent to $3.5 billion or higher for the entire firm. The specific portion sold was not disclosed. Acronis provides backup, disaster recovery, and cybersecurity solutions. Source: The Register. South Korea hands Coupang a record-breaking $409 million data privacy fine. South Korea's data protection regulator issued a $409 million fine to e-commerce company Coupang, the largest privacy penalty in the country's history. The enforcement action continues South Korea's aggressive approach to data breach response, which has previously included suspending financial institutions' ability to enroll new customers following major data leaks. Details of the specific violations were not provided in the available coverage. Source: Data breaches, net. Next section: Patch priority. Splunk Enterprise Critical RCE, CVE 2026-20253, CVSS 9.8, patch to 10.0.7, 10.2.4 or 10.4 immediately. On-prem SharePoint 0-day under active exploit. Microsoft patches failed. Isolate from external access and monitor for IOCs until working patch releases. NPM packages upgrade to NPM 11.16.0 plus and audit dependency scripts before July's NPM 12 breaking changes. Next section: Trends and context. Today's stories highlight 3 persistent security challenges. Authentication stack compromises enable decade-long persistence even in isolated networks. Supply chain attacks continue to abuse default package manager behaviors, and AI model security is now subject to export controls. The Velvet Ant campaign demonstrates that air-gapped networks provide limited protection when attackers control the bridge between zones and can backdoor the authentication layer itself. That concludes today's cyber threat brief. From Carolina Clear Tech. Stay patched, stay vigilant.